What's up, hobby friends, and welcome to my vlog video for April, where I talk about my hobby for the past month of March. And then in this particular video, I'm going to focus primarily on the recap of my Adepticon 2023 experience. In terms of what I actually worked on hobby-wise, it was primarily focused on finishing up some pieces and projects for Adepticon. So I did my Marvel 2v2 display board. I did the AoS Sigmar Teams display board. I painted up Gamora for my client, and then I made some final tweaks to my Hulkbuster for the Path of the Worthy entry. The board for Marvel ended up taking far longer than I thought it would. I'd allocated, I think, 2 days, so a weekend, and it ended up taking about a week. And then similarly, because my Path of the Worthy entry beforehand in the month of February took far longer, 3 weeks as opposed to the one that I had budgeted, I ended up not having as much time as I would have liked to work on the Age of Sigmar board. So I'll throw up the photo on the screen as I go through each of the day's events as I recap my weekend at Adepticon. But I think going in, I wasn't quite happy with the end result, and I definitely want to do better. In terms of the actual weekend itself, I guess we'll just dive right on in. So we ended up leaving super early Wednesday morning. I think this was March the 22nd. And basically I left home at around 5:30, 6 in the morning. And the goal was to basically drive the entire day, beat all of the traffic, and get to Chicago by about 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then if you account for the time change, it would jump back to be about 4:30, 5 o'clock. Pretty good. I think the only misadventure that we had, because my Google Maps, I had it set to the most fuel efficient route, it ended up taking us to the Platypole Ferry, which was on reservation land. So rather than go through something like Sarnia or Buffalo, we ended up driving quite a number of hours further west than normal, and we ended up taking a ferry. Bit of an adventure. I was not expecting to be taking a boat on the drive down, but we made it there alive, and we ended up not really taking too much of a detour time-wise. We still arrived in Schaumburg around 4:30, 5 o'clock with the time change. Gave us plenty of time to check in, grab some dinner at Kuma Burger, and then we tried to get to the hall around 7:30, like 7:30 to actually pre-register, grab all of our badges and swag. But for whatever reason, this year it ended up being really chaotic, really messy, and the lineup was insane. When we got there at 7:30, there was probably at least a two and a half hour lineup. And so we decided to go do some grocery shopping. We grabbed some beer, went back to the hotel to unwind, hung out, watched some South Park. And when we showed up at the hall at like 10 o'clock, usually in past years, it was like, okay, well, we figure it's late enough in the evening. Everyone's got their tickets and their badges. Everyone's registered, and we should be able to breeze through the line. No, there was still at least like another hour wait in the lineup, and we didn't end up getting our tickets and our swag probably till 11. So that sort of put a bit of a damper on the evening. And then considering that some of my friends had an early start on the Thursday and Friday for Age of Sigmar Champions, it kind of just killed the vibe of our evening. On Thursday, while my friends were playing in the Age of Sigmar Championship, I ended up just sort of hanging out in the hall. I submitted my entries for Path of the Worthy. So I submitted Hulkbuster for singles. I submitted my Sentinels for the squad. And then the actual entry that I cared about was my Spider-Man versus Dr. Octopus for the duel or the diorama category. We ended up signing up for a Shatterpoint demo at 4:30. And then we played in a couple of the organized play events. So there was the Colossus event, I think Rampaging Colossus or something. And then we had signed up for Mutant Masterworks as well, but there wasn't a third opponent for us to run the event proper. So my friend and I grabbed the cards and just fucking pulled the report and bailed out there. And then we ended up going to an amazing taco place for dinner. I believe it was called Fat Rosie's, which was just down the road from the actual convention hall, about a minute drive from our hotel. We ended up going back there again on Saturday evening, just because the food was so good and we wanted a nice, consistent dinner place to go to. Friday was the Marvel 2v2 team event. So while two of my friends were finishing up the Age of Sigmar Championship, my friend Lewis and I, this was his first Adepticon, we ended up playing in the Marvel 2v2. So when I signed up, I had originally thought it was a 3-game event, and it's supposed to be one day. The ticket price wasn't super high. I think it was like $40 or $50. And so in my mind, it was a safe assumption, 3-game event, be done at like 6:30, do the award ceremony, go to dinner. No. It turned out that, so we got the rules package along with the schedule about a month after we had bought the tickets, and it was a grueling 5-game event. So we started at 7:30, or we were supposed to start at 7:30, and the games would go all the way till 8 p.m. When we got there, I guess because people were still having to register and sign up on Longshanks, they didn't actually start the games until almost an hour later. We started rolling dice until like 8:30, 9 o'clock, which meant that the entire day's events were pushed back by an hour. And then they had a 10-minute sort of call at the end of each game where if you were starting or if you were in the middle of a turn, finish a turn, don't start a new one. If you were near the end of a turn or almost done a turn and they called 10 minutes, don't start a new turn, wrap up your games. There was one table where, and they weren't even in contention for anything, they were playing for 21st place. They had literally just started the round. I think they were just assigning power or just about to take their first activation when they called 10 minutes dice down, or 10 minutes of dice down, and they chose to play out their full turn. So rather than finish the event within 10 minutes and be done, they played an entire battle round that ended up going another 45 minutes. So 10 minutes till whenever the event ended, I call it 9, and then a full half hour afterwards. We couldn't do the award ceremony till 9:30, which meant that was pushed back, and we didn't finish till like 9:45, 10 o'clock, once you had all the different prizes, all the different awards, all the raffles that they were doing. So I think that was honestly inconsiderate of the team that chose to play out their full game, but it is what it is. Honestly, not much I can do about that. So at the end of it, we went 4-1. We won 4 of our games, all nail biters, fantastic opponents, and the final scores had a points differential of like anywhere from 1, 2 to 3 points. They were neck and neck. In fact, I remember our 3rd game against Crime Syndicate, turn 5, we were literally 15-15, and any 1 point would have won the game. The final score for that one ended up being 19-18 in our favor. Man, that was a close game right to the end. We did lose one game against a very powerful Brotherhood list that ran Magneto, Juggernaut, Rhino, Mystique, and Ulik. And honestly, great guys, great opponents. The team was powerful. I think it was made more powerful because we were playing 24 threat. But even if we had played a game properly, I don't think it would have mattered. Our dice were just not with us that game. I don't think I rolled more than like 1 or 2 hits when making attacks. It was mostly blanks or skulls, and our opponents would be like 4 dice Mystique rolling like triple crit consistently. I think in one volley, Mystique one-shot Miles Morales, and then in another volley, one-shot, I think it was Spider-Woman or something. It was ridiculous, and honestly, nothing we could do about that. We still came out 5th overall. I think there was something like 30 or 35 teams. And we also won Best Painted or Best Appearance out of all the teams. I'm not sure if it was just the models itself or a combination of the display board and the models, but that was awesome. I'm very happy with that. We walked away with these medals, as well as a couple of Hydra tanks as our swag. My board did get bumped a little bit, so I think in the photo that you're seeing, one of the buildings, you'll see the exposed insulation foam. So that was a little disappointing. I get that the tables are close together and you kind of have to be careful not to bump into people, bump into their things, bump into their models, but the fact that they just walk into a display board that's sitting on a table or sitting on a tray and they don't even notice. Like you walk into it with enough strength to tear off an entire sheet of plastic card that's been resin glued to foam and you don't even notice. And I'm like, come on, man, it's like, I think that was probably the downer of the day, and it left a little bit of a sour taste because it happened during lunch. I wasn't there to unfortunately watch it. We'd gone to the bar to grab a drink, which coincidentally, it happened after the second game where we got smashed by Brotherhood. So I wasn't there to actually watch the models. So whoever did it was, you know what? Shame on you. You're an adult. Our Saturday and Sunday, we ended up taking part in the Age of Sigmar team tournament. So again, just to recap, we were running a double Lumineth and double Daughters of Cain list, focused around the old narrative of high elves, dark elves. We wanted a lot of balance, sort of yin and yang, and the motif of our display board was a bit of a Heaven's Gate. We balanced our color palettes around the idea of balancing out the colors, lots of white with fuchsia accents for the Lumineth, and lots of fuchsia with darker colors and white accents for the Daughters. We misunderstood the player package, and in particular the way that they were going to be pairing off the teams. I think had we known that, we would have gone with different armies or different lists, but as it was, because it was forced pairings, we weren't able to really optimize our pairings for the mission and our opponents. So we ended up going 1-3-1, so win, draw, loss. And the way it works is because it's 2 pairs, it's 4 players and they both pair off, you take the aggregate of the scores to give you results. So if both win, or both pairings win, that counts as a win. If I guess one majors and one major wins, one major losses, that counts as a draw. If one major wins, one minor losses, I guess that counts as a minor win. And then if both lose, it's a major loss. So when it's a draw, which was 3 of our games, one of our pairings did a major win, and then one of the other pairings got a major loss, which sort of balanced out the score. Our first game was a major win. I'm going to throw up the photos on the screen. It was a long day. I don't remember our opponents. But again, much like with the Marvel thing, we had some pretty tough pairings in terms of the army lists, but we never had a bad game because our opponents were all phenomenal. All great players, all very sportsmanlike. I don't think we had a bad opponent the entire weekend, so I think that definitely made drawing or losing still enjoyable because the games were still fun and never felt like we were having to really grind through or slog through a difficult game because of the people we were playing against. So Age of Sigmar team tournament, always a great time. I believe it was a win into a major win into a major loss, and then it was draw for our last game. It was a win and a loss for both of our pairings, and we would just swap and alternate both sides. Turns out, Squigs, specifically, very powerful. And there was the one mission where we lost, where it was Realmstone Cache, so one single objective with Zinch shooting and magicking us off the board while 2 Gargants just sat on the objective. Honestly, nothing we could do about that. That was just bad mission with a bad matchup. But we still walked away with a couple of raffle prizes. So I walked away with a Get Started Seraphon kit, which has the old Saurus and the old Saurus Cav, which, let's be honest, with the new Seraphon coming out, they're basically garbage. I'll probably use them as like bits, and then I'll test out color schemes and recipes. But it has an old one on a Carnosaur, which I think is not being redone. Still a great model. My friend Lewis walked away with a box of Witch Elves. And then we also won Best Technical Appearance, or Best Appearance. And this was for having the best painted armies out of all the teams. So we're not looking at the display board, we're looking purely at the armies. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with that. I recognize that the display board that I made ended up not being of my usual caliber. I think we over-invested or over-indexed into the gimmick of the Light Ring in the hopes that we could help draw attention. Our experience with Age of Sigmar, both in the singles and in the teams in years past, has been that the judges don't usually, or they can't pay attention to the models unless you have some way of drawing attention. And then even in the poorly lit halls, when they're looking at your models, they don't really see what they're looking at. But this year, the judges actively had all the boards up front, especially if you were submitting for the appearance. You could mark down when you were signing up, we're going for appearance. They had a spot for you to put the tables up. And they all walked around with LED lamps to actually take a look at the models. They made sure to grab the captains in each of the individual teams to actually go through, ask us about our armies, talk to us about our themes, and really dive into each of the armies. So I think They definitely did a really good job doing the appearance judging, and I think that the gimmick of the light ring was probably a cost in both time and money that was unnecessary, and something I'll take away moving forward for next year, where I'll be able to spend a lot more time actually doing a narrative for the board and less time figuring out and making a stupid gimmick. It also didn't help that I think by the time I was actually working on a floating island, I had more or less checked out. The new KO had been out. I was already excited to move on to other things, which meant that I was no longer interested in working on that Age of Sigmar board. So I think the quality was lacking. Being on a time crunch, doing it like a week before the actual Adepticon event didn't help either. So I think for what I did, it was still pretty good. I think we scored 84 on the appearance judging, and we were invited to the overnight parade of the armies in the convention hall. So that was still pretty cool. We got a lot of kudos. People really loved our armies and our models, in particular the color scheme and the palettes. I think most people were most impressed by the fact that it was 4 people painting 4 armies, and they ended up with something that was unified and cohesive, not just in the color palette, but also the style. And I think something that our group has always prided itself on is being able to lift each other and hold each other to that high caliber of painting quality. And I'm glad that we were able to show it at Adepticon. Even if our board was lacking, people were still able to admire the models. That was the other thing too about that day, where I think it was a bit of a challenge for us, because we started our games at 8:30. It was super stressful because for the first hour they couldn't figure out the pairings. Either the app wasn't working properly, or the tables had been misnumbered, or it wasn't communicated how the table pairings were supposed to be done. And so I think they ended up repairing all the teams 3 times before going back in, calling all the captains up, and literally pairing them off one by one and escorting them to the tables they were playing at. So start of the day super stressful. We ended finishing up the day around 6:30, and the judges, or one of the judges, pulled us aside and were like, okay, well, we want to set up your army in the convention thoroughfare for our after hours parade, which meant that our armies had to be there on display until like 11:30. Thankfully, we didn't have to actually stay there, so we set up our armies, and then we just left for dinner. We went to Fat Rosie's the second time, and then we came back around 10:45, 11 to pack everything up and load up the car and go back to the hotel. But it ended up being another long day where we couldn't finish our games, go have dinner, and then just relax or hang out at the hotel. So compared to years past, like, we're not young people now. We're like early mid-30s. Someone was potentially even pushing 40s. It's grueling. And while I recognize that it's a once a year thing, I was not mentally or physically prepared, based on my experiences from past Adepticons, for how long some of my days were this past weekend. So I think it was a smart move, or a smart choice on my part, not to book front-to-back events for all 4 days, but having back-to-back Friday, Saturday events, and then on Sunday, because we started our day early at 8:30, finished the day's events, did the award ceremony, and then immediately afterwards at like 6:30, we drove straight all the way back to Toronto. I got home at like 5 a.m. So that was 3 long days. It was, thankfully, we didn't overdrink. We were responsible. We were in bed by like 11:30, sometimes midnight, depending on the day's schedule. And I smartly or wisely booked the Monday off. So I was able to basically get in, sleep the entire day or half the day, sort of try and reset myself, unpack, and just unwind. So I think in terms of events, still good, a lot of fun. For next year, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think we're still certain to try again for Age of Sigmar teams, which means that I'm wary of signing up for Age of Sigmar singles as well. 4 days back-to-back just seems like a lot, and I definitely want to have another day off, or at least a half day. It'll come down to what events are available at the time. That was the other thing too, and I know I'm rambling, I'm sorry, but this is just going to be a ramble of my Adepticon experience. The vendor hall, not the greatest. I always looked forward to wandering the vendor halls in previous years because you always had a lot of not just smaller studios, but a lot of vendors who would sell awesome handcrafted stuff. You had a lot of mugs, leather-made knickknacks, dice trays. People would sell T-shirts, dice bags. People sold widgets and wound counters made of like high-quality acrylic. On top of you had like Corvus Belli showcasing their new Infinity models. You would have smaller studios like whatever company does Arena Rex. The name escapes me. At the time, I guess Atomic Mass would have been a little smaller. Plus, you had the bigger companies like Games Workshop and Forge World. Just an amazing assortment of shops and vendors and products to really browse. And there was something for everyone. And you could lose yourself spending hours looking and going from booth to booth, trying to find things that would be cool as souvenirs or that you could actually take home and use. This past year, I'm going to be honest, that vendor hall was pure trash. Not counting 1 or 2 studios like Corvus Belli or Games Workshop / Forge World, half the vendors were just stores selling their product. And this is product that you could buy at any local gaming store. Like Lords of War in Oakville carries all these products. We're looking at like basic AK paints. We're looking at bolt action. We're looking at Word miniatures, Marvel Crisis Protocol models, Games Workshop, like 40k Age of Sigmar stuff. All stuff that you could buy from your local hobby store. They weren't even discounted. So like, why were they there beyond just trying to sell product to a larger audience? The other half was all just 3D printed and MDF laser cut products. And 1 or 2 vendors is fine, but everyone's doing it and it's all the same stuff. Like, I don't understand why they need to fill an entire vendor hall with just rows and rows of people selling their own 3D printed stuff. I'm like, come on, man. So, yeah, we had the Thursday off, but I literally walked the vendor hall in 30 minutes. I submitted my worthy entries. I spent some time looking at the Shatterpoint models, and I took a quick browse around to see that, no, there was nothing I wanted, and that was it. I didn't go back in again, except to maybe periodically check up and try and see some cool new Path of the Worthy entries, and that was pretty much it. Very disappointing. And then finally, I want to talk about the Path of the Worthy, more just focused on the results in my experience. I'm not really going to deep dive into the entries I made and sort of my journey through that, my learnings, and then my takeaways, what my plans are for that. I'll have already released a video last week covering all of that. And while I'm recording it, this vlog was being recorded beforehand. So hopefully that was informative and insightful. If you watched it, thank you for watching. If you weren't aware, I won. So, and it wasn't just a win. I, as they called it, clean swept, which honestly was a surprise to me because I wasn't expecting to clean sweep, in particular the singles and the squads. I recognize that the Hulkbuster and the Sentinels are, from a technical perspective, well painted, but my impression from the judging rubric and the way that they had positioned the Path of the Worthy, narrative and storytelling was just as important as the painting of the entries themselves. So in my mind, I had always figured that there would be a lot of good painters who would submit entries that were specifically made for the Path of the Worthy, and because those would have stronger narrative, they would at least have a shot of winning the mighty trophy. So that's this Mjolnir's hammer. But it turns out that my entries were technically proficient enough to be able to basically not just win gold, but win the mighty, being the best in each category. So my Sentinels, my Hulkbuster, and then of course my Spider-Man versus Dr. Octopus duel were all the mighty. And then of course you're going to pick the actual worthy from each of the 3 of them. So no surprise, I won it. And that's with this giant honking statue here. So apparently, solid resin, this is 33 pounds. I have not weighed this, but I'd believe it. It's heavy. Yeah. It was great. Honestly, there were a lot of great entries, particularly in the diorama. when I had gone in, I did struggle trying to find models that would pair well together. So it was really cool and really inspiring to see what other artists and painters had come up with in terms of the narrative storytelling. Never mind like the technical painting ability. I think that in itself is like a great achievement, and it just goes to show that like even as a painter, someone who won the award, they could still look at other entries and have something to take away. And I think that's something that's always valuable about these painting contests. Even if you don't win anything, you're entering to gauge your own strength, you're looking to evaluate your own growth, but also to be inspired and motivated by what other people are entering. And you can always learn something from everyone. I think I'm definitely going to be going in to prepare for my next year's entries with not just specific entries made for the Path of the Worthy, but to be a little bit more adventurous in thinking a little bit outside the box for which models I could combine to tell those stories and those narratives. In terms of content creation and my plans for the month of April, it's going to be a fairly light hobby month, I think, painting-wise. I'm going to be focused on finishing the expansion for my KO. So I'm currently working on a frigate and a couple of heroes for my junk force. So I'll probably release a couple of painting tutorials and an overview of that. I also have I think a Gamora tutorial that will also go up on YouTube. So in addition to the vlog, that should cover the YouTube content for the month. I haven't decided what I'm painting yet for Patreon. I don't know. I'll find something. It's probably not going to be a big piece, but hopefully I'll be able to find a cool, fun piece that I'll be able to explore a little bit of something different. I think I'm definitely a little bit burnt out on painting smaller figures. So 28 mils, even 40 mils, I'm getting a little bit tired of. So if I do paint any models outside from the junk force, because they're fairly simple halflings, I'm probably going to try and focus on larger pieces. So the frigate, fairly large, I think it ends up being like, or it will end up being like 12 inches tall. And I'll want to paint Rhino, which I think he's like a 50 or 60 mil figure. And then maybe work on some more terrain. I don't know. I need a bit of a break before I pivot back to grinding out 28 mil figures. Also, Tangent, I think Shatterpoint is going to ruin me. I didn't get to watch the Atomic Mass stream, or I guess showing that happened after the Path of the Worthy announcements. I had to go back to play the team tournament, so I missed all that. But yesterday, which is the Monday, I was able to find the stream on the Professional Casual Network, or the Casual Professional Network. Rewatched it, and the kits that they have on the roadmap for the next year is insane. I'm like, I'm in danger. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I know it was a little bit longer than usual, a little bit rambly, but I had a lot to share about Adepticon about my experience. Had a great time, and I'm looking forward to my hobby goals for the next few months. And then I've already started brainstorming, planning, and plotting for Adepticon 2024. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you give it a like, subscribe for more awesome weekly content, and I'll see you next time. Happy hobbying.